What's up, everyone? Welcome to Fam Sports New York Varsity. I'm your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marsilio Langella. And Mars, this is our Week 4 Section 1AA preview show. And I want to welcome you to the show, man. How's it going?
It's going well, man. The fact that we're in Week 4 already is obviously meaning that it's just flying by. So we're like around, midway through the regular season. We only got a few more weeks left, and then it's playoff time.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to welcome our audience to the show. We appreciate you guys for tuning in, like always. And obviously in this show, we're going to be breaking down Section 1AA Week 4. And if you're new to the show, welcome. And if you like this kind of content, talking about Section 1 football, make sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe for future content. Also, if you would like to donate to our channel, again, we're a kind of a grassroots group. We get all our funds from donations. And appreciate any donations, but you can get access to our Patreon in the description below, as well as our website at famsportsny.com. All right, so now that that's done, Mars, again, we are going to be talking about the games on slate. I'm actually going to kind of give an update on the league standings for both sides, and then we're going to do a breakdown of a couple of the big games and pick all the games at the end. So let's dive right into it. Games on slate for this week: White Plains 0-3 at Ossining, who's 2-2 league game. RCK is at John J. East Fishkill. That is a non-league game, but a big-time rivalry being renewed there. Arlington at Carmel, that's a big league game. Mamaroneck at Yonkers Brave is a league game. North Rockland at Yonkers Force is a league game. Suffern at Mount Vernon is a league game. And Scarsdale at Rochelle, which is another rivalry, that is a league game as well. But Mark's kind of giving updates on where the league standing are, because again, we're at Week 4. These games are really starting to be extremely important. And again, I'm not sure exactly what the name of the leagues are, but I'm gonna call them League A and League B. But on one side of the league, League A, you have Carmel and Arlington tied at the top, both 2-0 in league conference play. I know Carmel's 3-0 and Arlington's 2-2, but those two losses are non-league losses. There's followed up by another tie between Mount Vernon and North Rockland, both 2-1 at league play. North Rockland did beat Mount Vernon, so they would get the tiebreaker if the season were to end today. Yonkers Force is followed up at 5. They're 1-2 in league play. They're 2-2 overall. Suffern is 0-2 in league play. They're 1-0 overall. And then RCK is 0-3 and 0-3 in league play. And on the other side, Mamaroneck 3-0 in league play. They're sitting at the top by themselves. Scarsdale's 2-0 in league play, 3-0 as a record. Followed by John J. East Fishkill, who's 2-1 in league play. Rochelle, who's 1-1 in league play. Tied with Ossining, who's also 1-1. Then it is White Plains, who's 0-3 and 0-2 in league play. And Yonkers Brave, who's 0-3 in league play. So those are the standings where they are right now, Mars. Let's talk about a couple of the biggest matchups. And I want to start with one of the big rivalries, non-league rivalries. And that is RCK 0-3 at John J. East Fishkill, who's 2-1. Last week, RCK lost at Carmel. John J. East Fishkill won versus Rochelle. And overall, again, big-time rivalry between these two schools, but most recently, John Jay has kind of owned this rivalry. They are 12-4 versus RCK, last 16 meetings. They have won 6 straight, including a very thrilling game last year where they won 27-22. Let's start with RCK. Now, it's been a bit of a struggle, especially offensively, for this group. They're a very young team. I mean, we spoke in the team preview, Mars, they have, 6 or 7 sophomores on this team. A very young team, is going to go through a lot of mistakes and a lot of growth. But in a rivalry game, I feel like, the level of, the level of effort is going to be kind of shot up this week, especially after a tough week last week on the road at Carmel. Offensively, Mars, this is the 13th ranked offense in points scored out of 14 teams. And, they gave up way too many sacks this season. Last week, they gave up 6 sacks. And so you got to kind of look at some of these playmakers. You're going to have to score points against John J. Fishkill because they're a pretty high-powered offense. And I look at their young quarterback, Dean Fitzsimons. He's going to have to make some tough throws with pressure in his face. He's been dealing with pressure all year. So he's got to make some smart decisions, not turn the ball over. But what can help Mars is running the ball. Guys like James Eaglet, Antonelli, is another bigger back, downhill runner. But they have a couple mix between a speedster, kind of shifty guy, and a downhill runner to try to get a running game going. And what that will do, Mars, it'll keep John J. Fishkill's offense on the sideline. And then a guy like Noel Martinez, I think, is their kind of biggest play threat on the outside. trying to see if you can hit one or two of those big ones is going to be a huge one. Defensively, Mars, they really struggled against the run. Now they're up against a spread scheme, and not much Carmel where it's the heavy sets that you're going to see a lot of. John G's Fischel is spreading you out, right? But they will run, especially with their quarterback. So all eyes have to be on that quarterback. The secondary will be tested. And what can help is this D-line getting some pressure. If they can't get pressure, it's going to be a long day for this defense. Mars, what are your thoughts on RCK?
When it comes to RCK, I always felt that they were the younger team that was going to take more time for them to get better over time. I think right now their offense is definitely trying to find a rhythm of some sorts, and it really has to do with the offensive line. Fact is, their playmakers need to step up, but I really think this is a kind of a statement game for the offensive line. They need to really set the standard, because if they don't really open up the lanes for run, then it's not going to do anything for the offense in general. And like you said before, that the offense will just get off the field quick, and that's not really going to give you any sort of possession and really just draw this game out in your favor. And defensively, I feel like it's going to be, I think it's good. To be honest, I think they just have to limit the big plays. They have to really try to contain these playmakers that John Jay has, and I think that if they can do that, try to control the time of clock, time of possession, it'll at least give their offense more breathing room to kind of make some plays here.
Nah, I agree. When we go to John Jay, Mars, I mean, they had probably one of their biggest wins against Rochelle at 35-0. I mean, Rochelle hasn't been beaten like that in a long, long time. And, they've been pretty, strong on both sides of the ball. And when I say offensively, Mars, about the spread attack, they're tied for number 3 in points scored out of the 14 teams in AA. Right, so this offense is humming. This spread attack has been strong. They ran for 247 yards last week, Mars. I mentioned RCK struggling against the run. They're going to test that. And it all starts with their quarterback, Feliciano. 4 touchdowns last week. A guy, dual threat guy, hurt you with his arm, hurt you with his legs. And I really think that they're going to try to run the ball with him and guys like Crouch as often as possible. And the play action pass out of that, they hit some big plays last week. And I think it can open up. They can get some run plays going up with the tempo. I think they're going to hit some big pass plays. And they do some crossers as well, kind of like some throwbacks and some screens that are really smooth. And they continue to be a good screen team. And I think that will continue in this game, getting the ball to guys like Martini downfield, running the ball with Crouch. They have some weapons, Mars. So, they're going to spread you out. It doesn't mean they're going to spread you out just to throw it all the time. They're going to try to run. I mean, they ran for a lot of yards. I think they try to do that again. Defensively, listen, again, against a young quarterback, what they want to try to do, and I think RSK is going to try to limit as many possessions that John Jay has. So they want to run the ball. And if they can stop them, get them in second, third, and long, that's when these young quarterbacks make a lot of mistakes. And so East Fishkill's got to try to get pressure up front, get them in second and third and long, and then that's where the turnovers are going to come. And Mars, this defensive unit, they're tied for second in points allowed in AA. I mean, this has kind of been the surprise unit for me. Not to say that East Fishkill has played good defenses in the past, but I think this defensive unit is well along, farther along than I anticipated so far this year. Mars, what are your thoughts on East Fishkill?
Yeah, John Jay's Fishkill definitely is proving that they are a top contender in AA. The fact is that their offense has been top tier. I think that they have a lot of playmakers, and the way their spread system has been very efficient, and that they've just been making big plays. They have a lot of guys that can really be game breakers on this offense, and it really has to do with the run. I think their offensive line has been performing very well, but I think this spread scheme allows them to do a dual threat of running the ball, keep getting the matchups they want to right, and then hitting you with the pass. And I think that's what they're going to try to do in this game. Try to really set the run first, hit the play action, and then just try to get you in some quick game. I think at the end of the day, John Jay's Fishkill has a lot of weapons here. Defensively, they just need to continually, set the pressure. And I think that when doing that to a young quarterback is going to cause some turnovers and allow their offense to get cooking.
Yeah. And my matchup to watch, I'm looking at this John Jay's Fishkill defensive front seven versus these RCK offensive linemen and running backs. If they can get themselves extra possessions, I think it's going to be a long day for RCK in the perspective of John Jay. All right, so let's go to the next game. North Rockland 2-2, 2-1 in league play at Yonkers Force, who's also 2-2. Again, big league matchup. North Rockland won at Suffern, first win against them in 3 years. Yonkers Force lost at Mount Vernon. The last time these guys played was in 2019 when North Rockland won. But let's start with North Rockland. I think offensively, Mars, this has kind of been the biggest hit and miss of this team right now, trying to find that consistency. This is the 11th ranked unit in points scored out of 14 teams in AA. And I think it's just they made some plays in each phase of the game last week, which really propelled them to victory. And when I look at that offense, it obviously starts with the quarterback. We talked about it a bunch of times, Italiano. 6 of 9 for 70 yards, right? Very efficient. Had that touchdown pass, also 61 yards rushing and a touchdown. This is a guy that they rely on to use both his arms and his legs, and he is the orchestrator of this spread attack. And I do think, again, Yonkers Force gave up some big plays in the run game last week. And I think they need to kind of establish that rush attack using their quarterback on runs, using Savor and Vasquez kind of attacking off tackle and in between the tackle box. And then some of those jet sweeps of guys like Greg Becker. I mean, those are going to be, if they can get a consistent rush attack, get them ahead of the chains. And then that's when those big pass plays are going to open up. But when they get behind, when they make mistakes, when they have holdings, that's when bad things happen. But I do think they'll have an opportunity to make some big plays. But the penalties have killed them, Mars. 13 penalties last week. I mean, it's hard to have a functioning offense. Now, that's not all offense, but it's hard to be consistent and be in a rhythm when you keep shooting yourself like that. But they have some weapons. I mean, Ethan Farrar, he had a big interception to seal last week's game. I mentioned Greg Becker, Montana Veit. He had a punt return for a touchdown. I mean, they have some weapons. They just need some consistency. Defensively, Mars, I think the big thing with those quarterbacks at Yonkers Force, those dual threat guys, and those kind of the big play offense passing the ball, they got to get pressure on the quarterback. And I do anticipate you're going to see some 3-3 looks where Yonkers Force going into that spread. And so I'm looking at kind of these defensive players, the defensive line, the linebackers, guys like Vasquez, Hernandez. They're going to have to be really important on these stunts. They're going to have to be disciplined, keep the quarterbacks in the box. And a guy, defensive back Farrar, who had that game-sealing INT, probably matching up against their top receiver in Aquino, going to be very interesting. Mars, what are your thoughts on North Rockland?
Yeah, I really think that the biggest issue they have right now is being consistent. I think the fact is they have a lot of guys who can make plays, but they just have been making too many mistakes, whether it was not hitting the holes the right way or just, like you said, just doing some penalties, right? Penalties are going to cripple your offense from moving in any sort of direction. So I really think they have to limit the amount of penalties that they have and also just be consistent. And I think just have longer drives will give your offense some rhythm, allow them to really score some more points. I think developing the run first is going to be really big for them. They can get to the outside, do some outside runs, they'll open up the play action and really allow their offense to start to cook a little bit. Defensively, I agree. I think it's going to be at the front seven to make a lot of pressure for this offense. And I think that at the end of the day, if they can do that, it will cause some mistakes and they can possibly get a turnover. And that's what they really need to have here. Force the turnovers and get their offense back on the field and try to get back in that rhythm.
Yeah. I mean, moving to Yonkers Force, Mars, this is a team on both sides of the ball that's been pretty solid. Offensively, Mars is the number 6 offense out of the 14 schools in points scored. They've scored 24-plus points in 3 out of the 4 games. And obviously, the big part of this offense is their quarterback play. And their quarterback, Martinez, Mars, 145 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns last week. Also had a passing touchdown. He's now had a touchdown, I believe, in each game this season. That's 4 straight games with a touchdown. And we know their wide receiver, Aquino, he had a receiving touchdown last week. He's now had a touchdown in 3 out of the first 4 games. So that tandem has been pretty strong. They have another quarterback in Okers who's been really important for them too. But too many sacks. Right? They gave up 4 sacks last week. They're going to be up against a 3-3 defense that you're going to see stunts from the internally and probably from externally as well. So the offensive line has to know where the stunts are coming from, Mars. If they can block it up, I do think that they can hit some big pass plays. They have to be smart with the football. Too many sacks given up. This offense has been pretty strong, except for some of the big negative plays that have hurt them. Defensively, Mars, this unit started off pretty strong, but they've given up 30-plus points now in 2 straight games, and they have really struggled against the run, especially some big chunk plays in the run game. They have to be strong on the edge. I think North Rockland is really going to try to test their will, running out on the edge, running off tackle, and I think they're going to use their running backs. So, this is going to be a big test for those edge defenders. They have to be smart. They have to be stout. Got to keep everything in the tackle box, swarm to the ball. And, again, tackling is going to be big. Too many missed tackles, too many big chunk plays. If that happens, they're going to lose this game, Mars. What are your thoughts on Yonkers Force?
Yeah, I feel like their offense has been very efficient so far, and the quarterback play has been very good. I think that Martinez has been very good throwing the ball, and I think he's been kind of setting this piece going forward. But I think that the fact is that their offense has just been consistently doing well on both the run and the pass. I think that's what's been allowing this offense to be so successful, just doing well consistently in each of these games so far. And I think that really has to do a lot with the offensive line as well. I think the offensive line has been playing consistently well. I think the key thing is that they need to continue doing this. If they do, then it will allow for the more runs, more protection on pass. It allows them to just move down the field more effectively. Because the big thing is going to be that North Rockland is going to start sending a lot of stunts. Right, they're going to be needing to send the heat. So if this offensive line can play consistent, then I think they'll be. I think they'll do fine. I think they'll do well, actually. And I think that's going to rely more about who can control the front. The trenches is going to be what dictates this game going forward. Defensively, it's going to be the same thing. If they can keep the contain, control the line of scrimmage, I think that's going to be what kind of sets the pace offensively and defensively.
Yeah, I like the way the O-line is playing, except for the sacks part. Too many sacks. My matchup to watch, Mars, I'm looking at the wide receiver Aquino of Yonkers Force versus Farrar. I'm hoping to see that matchup. Wide receiver versus DB. I think that's going to be a pretty good one. Let's go to the next game, Mars. Suffern 1-2 at Mount Vernon, who's 2-1. This is a league game. Suffern lost to North Rockland last week. Mount Vernon won versus the Force against their new stadium, which was a really cool sight and good for that program. Suffern, though, 6-0 versus Mount Vernon, Mars. They last played, though, in 2019, so it's been a couple years. Let's start with Suffern. It has been, I mentioned some of the inconsistencies that North Rockland faced last segment. Suffern offensively has also suffered those inconsistencies. They are number 12 out of 14 teams scoring offensively, and it's just been the self-inflicting wounds that have been killing them. Last week, Mars, they gave up a safety. Offensively, they had 7 penalties, 2 turnovers. These are things that are crippling to an offense, and I think they're going to have success this week if they don't shoot themselves in the foot running the football. I think Mount Vernon gave up 145 plus yards to Martinez, the quarterback, last week, and I'm anticipating to see a run-heavy scheme and probably a bunch of wildcat and some heavy sets. And relying on this offensive line, guys like Ryan and the rest of this offensive line need to open up some holes for them. And Mount Vernon, they like to be very aggressive, like to stunt from the inside, send linebackers, but the way you can counter that is running right at them, right? Not going east and west, run north and south. And, giving the ball to guys like Don Dorselli, who he had 92 yards rushing last week, but only 13 carries, right? He had a touchdown. Jeff Joseph, he had 81 yards rushing and 12 carries. I'm hoping to see both these guys at least 15 plus carries each. And their quarterback, I think it'll make it easier for their young quarterback. Palumbo, he was 9 of 15, right? Not too bad. 78 yards, a touchdown, but an INT, right? So if you can run the ball and get it ahead of the chains, it'll help a young, inexperienced quarterback. And I think that's what's got to be the remedy for them, especially against a Mount Vernon team that showed you can run a little bit on them, especially this offensive line attacking north and south. Defensively, again, I thought they were pretty good last week. Points, they gave up points off of safety. And so they only gave up, 15 points, right? They only gave up 15 points as a defense. The big thing to me is preventing big plays. Mount Vernon is a big play offense. They have a lot of speed. They get into open space. It's hard to tackle them. And they hit a couple, 20-plus yard plays that really set up touchdowns for them. So the edge of this defense is going to be really important, preventing that big play. And I'm looking at guys like Lutz. Their linebacking core that I think is pretty strong. And this secondary forced some turnover. I mean, Harris, Snell, Lou, Camacho, and I know Snell, Lou, and Camacho had INTs last week. So this defense, when they line up correctly, they can be a force. And that's going to be the big thing. Line up correctly, don't allow big plays. Marsh, what are your thoughts on Suffern?
Yeah, I think Suffern is also suffering from being inconsistent. And I think the biggest problem that they have is that they always make mistakes that really dampen these drives. I think they have to be consistent. And every drive they have needs to be a positive one. Not saying they have to come away with scoring every drive. I mean, granted, that'd be great. But I think the biggest thing I'm looking for is to not waste drives, right? If you having a drive where you start out with having penalties, where you're having, lost plays, I think just going backward is not going to benefit your offense at all. If anything, if you don't score, you need to really pound the rock and drive down the field to really wear out the opposing defense, because at least then you're going to start kind of wearing kids down, and that might benefit you when you get the ball back again, right? The key thing is never have negative plays and continually get more yards every single drive until obviously you can get that touchdown or you can get some points on the board would be obviously the most important thing. I think the run offense needs to be the priority this week. But defensively, I think the secondary is going to be tested. I think they're going to have they have a lot of playmakers on Mount Vernon. I think the key thing is going to be about trying to contain the run, because if they get to the outside, they have some speed that could really hurt you. So you got to see what happens here. I think that Suffern has a solid defense. They can handle it. But like I said, the biggest question is going to be offensively. What did they do here that kind of gives their offense more life?
Yeah, let's talk about Mount Vernon and offensively for Mount Vernon. Listen, this offense has been pretty solid, right? Number 7 out of 14 teams in points scored. They have playmakers, right? The quarterback Dieter and Jaden Hamilton combined for 208 yards rushing last week. And Dieter, was also 7 of 11, 105 yards and 2 touchdown passes. So he was really strong last week. And they got guys that they can get the ball to, right? I mentioned Hamilton, but they have Boyd who had 2 receiving touchdowns. Vassell had 2 rushing touchdowns. The question to me is how could they hold up front versus a Suffern front 7 that can cause some damage, right? So if they can hold up front, these playmakers can make plays in space, and that's going to be the goal, right? Get them in space, try to run the football with some efficiency, which will set up the pass again. And I think that's going to be a big thing for them. And North Rockland last week against Suffern, their quarterback did some damage both throwing and running the ball. So my focus on Mount Vernon's quarterback, he has the ability to do the same as well. He's got some thickness to him. I'm interested to see how this offense attacks this Suffern defense. But defensively, Mars, listen, last week they had 4 sacks. They had INT from Collins. This unit was led by Vassell and their defensive lineman, Nazir John. This Mount Vernon defense likes the blitz. They're not going to sit back, right? They're not going to play a lot of read technique and push the offensive lineman back. They want to go shoot through gaps, right? They want to blitz these linebackers. They want to cause negative plays. They want to get you behind the chains, and that's got to be the goal, right? Get these young, inexperienced quarterbacks to be the ones to try to throw Suffern ahead of the chains, right? That's got to be the goal. If they're running down on you and it's 2nd and 3, 3rd and 1, and you're getting these long drives, it puts your offense on the sideline. Mount Vernon does not want that. Marsh, what are your thoughts on Mount Vernon?
Yeah, when it comes to Mount Vernon, they've been very good it's very solid on the offensive end. Like you said, they're 7th ranked in points scored. I think the fact is they have a lot of playmakers that can really open up the game for you if you get them to the outside. And the offensive line really is going to need to open up some lanes for these guys. And obviously, I think the biggest thing is that if they can, just like how I said with Suffern, if they can be consistent and try to come away with something right, on the offensive drives, it's going to really cause some issues for the opposing defense. And Suffern is obviously going to struggle if they can't keep your guys, Mount Vernon's guys, inside. If they get to the outside, it's going to really cause some issues for this defense because Mount Vernon has a lot of speed. They have a lot of guys who can make big plays, and I think that's going to be the key thing. Defensively, it's like Mount Vernon's going to set a lot of heat. So I think the key thing here is that they had to land on their stunts, land on their blitzes, and really cause some pressure to really possibly get a turnover. Right, get your offense back on the field so you can make some big plays.
Yeah, my matchup to watch, I'm looking on the defensive front of Mount Vernon versus this Suffern offensive line. I really do think Suffern is going to try to attack running the football, and that's going to be key in this matchup. All right, Mars, let's go to the next matchup. Scarsdale 3-0 at Rochelle, who's 2-2. Big league game and a rivalry. And Scarsdale obviously had that huge upset versus Arlington last week. Rochelle lost at John Jay's Fishkill, and they got thumped, let's be honest, right? But when you look at this matchup, Rochelle's 10-1 in the last 11 matchups versus Scarsdale. They have won 8 straight, including a win last year. But let's start with Scarsdale, Mars. Listen, you can tell me, but I think Scarsdale's for real. I think they had a very impressive upset last week. And offensively, Mars, they are tied for 3rd out of the 14 teams in points scored. This has been an offense that has been really strong and really explosive. They last week I saw them spread things out a little bit more. There was a mix of kind of some power read concepts and some of the option. And what it did is create space for their athletes. And it starts with their quarterback. And we talked about him a bunch of times, Colby Baldwin. Now, again, passing-wise, only 4 for 11 for 55 yards, including an interception, but had that game-winning touchdown near the end of the game and 198 yards rushing and a touchdown. I mean, this guy was very explosive. Some of his rush plays really sparked this offense. And they're going to need more other people to make plays as well, not just him. Obviously, huge reliance on him. He plays both ways, Mars. He had 9 tackles, too. I love when, you have a quarterback who's willing to play both ways, which is really great. I know a lot of quarterbacks, coaches are afraid of doing that, but there's got to be some other backs that got to step up and help Colby at this time because I know that's the game plan is to slow him down, right? So, but they have some guys, right? They're running back Killian, their fullback Delgarico, who had 2 touchdowns last week on 28 yards rushing. Gil Herme, Demora, he had that game-winning touchdown off the hands of the defender, pretty much to put them ahead. They have to rely on some of these guys to make plays, and I do think the play action will set things up. I think New Rochelle gave up some big pass plays last week. They want to test the discipline of these DBs, but it all starts with the run with them. And so if they can get some running plays going, if Kobe can't hit that 190 yards, who else is going to step up is going to be the big question. Defensively, listen, this defensive line and linebackers, they're not the biggest, right? But they can use their speed against a bigger front in New Rochelle. They use their speed decently well against Arlington. At times, they did give up some big rushes. But I'm interested to see how they're going to play New Rochelle, who's going to be more spread than what they saw versus Arlington. Are they going to stay in their kind of their five-man front like they did last week? Or are they going to kind of put one of their outside linebackers who were up on the line of scrimmage, they're going to put them out more in space? It's going to be interesting to see how they do that. And the big guy I'm looking at is defensive end outside linebacker Noah Chappelle. This guy, 6'4", 200 pounds, strong edge player for them. He's going to have to be huge in this against the speed of New Rochelle. Kobe Baldwin, he had 9 tackles last week. This is a two-way player for them who's a big-time player. We talked about him offensively, but defensively, another guy who makes a lot of tackles for them. Trevor Knopp was all over the place. He had 10 tackles. I think he had 9 T as well. In the secondary, he's going to have to match up against these receivers of New Rochelle, which is going to be really important. And Del Garrico, 7 tackles as well. Listen, they won last week, and it was a really impressive victory. They gave up a lot of rush yards. And I think New Rochelle is going to try to test them out on the edge using their speed and some power running as well. And how is Scarsdale going to handle that? Interested to see, like I mentioned, how they set up their defensive front. Mars, what are your thoughts on Scarsdale?
Yeah, I mean, Scarsdale's been very surprising on how well they've been just scoring at will, essentially. They're very explosive. I think all around they've been mixing it up from more spread looks, more power looks. I think that they have a nice kind of collection of formations and ways to attack. And I think that's what's giving them a lot of life here. I think the key thing is that they have multiple guys who could hurt you on the offense, but this game you're going to need to have guys who may not have stepped up before need to step up. This needs to be a collective, right? Everyone has to be contributing in some way, in some form. I think that's going to be key for victory for Scarsdale to have going forward. But the key thing I think is going to be developing the run and obviously always having positive plays, right? I think that's always been the consistent thing that Scarsdale needs to have, and so far they've been doing that pretty well.
Yeah.
Defensively, I think that needs to be, obviously they're more quicker guys, but they need to kind of land a lot of their stunts that they're going to send, as well as just in pass rush, because you're going to want to set up the pressure, right? And I agree with you. I think keeping contained is going to be really important because New Rochelle is going to have a lot of speed, right? You know what I mean? I think they're going to have a lot of guys that can just get to the outside and cause some mayhem. So Scarsdale is going to have to step it up big time, keep the line of scrimmage, keep the front, and make sure that keep everything inside.
Going to New Rochelle, Mars, last week, obviously, to me, was a burn tape type of game, right? You watch the tape, you take your notes on what you did right and wrong, and you burn that tape, right? It was an ugly game. Make no mistake about it. When you look on the offensive side of the ball, Scarsdale, I mentioned last week, gave up a lot of chunk plays on the run, right? And this offensive line, Mars, has a size advantage versus Scarsdale. Now, if you just go east and west all the time, Scarsdale's going to use their speed, and they were able to penetrate at times against Arlington using that speed to create negative plays. But if New Rochelle can attack upfield, north and south, kind of attack the C gaps, attack the B gaps at times, running with Raiden Davis, there is opportunities to hit some big run plays. I mean, they can make some noise running the football. And whoever the quarterback, again, Lee Hester, him getting some rushes as well is going to be important. We talk about their quarterback, Austin Luzzy, who it was good to see him out there last week. He's obviously going to have to be huge for them. Right now, again, don't know his health status and stuff like that, but he's going to have to be extremely important if playing for them. And he's going to have to be consistent. He's going to have to be efficient throwing the football, and they got to get their weapons in one-on-one opportunities. Now, if they can run the ball, it's going to create an issue for Scarsdale. They're going to have to bring an extra man in the box, which will create some man opportunities for them. So running the ball to me is number one priority, but number two, taking advantage of some of the man-to-man stuff, and that's getting the ball to Hester, Clark, Dawson, Anderson, whoever. You got to rely on these guys to win one-on-one and make the correct read and throw. Defensively, Mars, I mentioned how surprising it was last week about this game in New Rochelle. I picked John J. Fishkill against New Rochelle, but I didn't expect the score to be what it was. To me, the biggest surprise, though, for New Rochelle right now is defensively. I mean, this is the number 9 defense out of 14 teams in points allowed. And that's pretty shocking to hear if you followed Section 1 football for a Rochelle defense, right? Being number 9. So I'm looking at this defense to try to step up this week. And obviously all eyes are on Baldwin and keeping him contained. You cannot let him to get to the outside. If he gets 2 or 3 yards, even 3 or 4 yards at times in between the tackles, you'll take it, wrap up, hit him, and again, go on to the next play. But when he gets to the outside, that's when the 20-yard plays happen. That's when the 30-yard plays happen. That's when the big touchdowns happen. So they got to keep him in the box, and they just have to be more disciplined with their eyes. They can't be ball watching. You have to stay to your keys. You have to attack your keys. It's going to be extremely important for this defense. And I'm looking at kind of their defensive leaders. Their linebacker, Red, who's been really strong for them, makes a lot of tackles on defense for Rochelle. And Benitez, the defensive lineman, is going to have to cause some penetration. They have a size advantage here, right? So can they push around this offensive line a little bit, who has good feet? Like, they're going to move, they're going to pull, they're going to down block, and they want to get out on the edge. So this is going to be hit big. I think this defense kind of needs to wake up a little bit. And I think they have an opportunity to kind of make a statement this week, Mars. What are your thoughts on Rochelle?
Yeah, I think I do agree with you that Rochelle does have a lot of advantages, especially on the size. I think speed is going to be where they're more comparable to what Scarsdale has, just because Scarsdale's got a lot of quick guys too. And I think the key thing that Rochelle is going to need to do is try to utilize his size and try to really run downhill, like you said, kind of open up the lanes using your offensive line. And the same thing we said on the defensive line. I think that the fact that they have a lot of bigger guys and just the fronts, the defensive front in general, they have more size all around. So the key thing that Rochelle needs to do is really kind of, I would say, force Scarsdale to want to have to throw more often. Obviously, it's going to be less likely, but the key thing is don't have, you need to force negative yards for Scarsdale so that they are forced to have to throw the deeper ball. And that's going to be where you have a chance to cause a turnover, get a pick, get your offense back on the field, and have the game more in your possession. I think that's going to be the key thing Rochelle needs to look for this game.
My matchup to watch, Morris, these Rochelle wide receivers versus the Scarsdale secondary. Again, if Rochelle can get the ball running a little bit, you're going to get some man-to-man opportunities, and it's going to be big on both sides of the ball to see who wins that matchup. Let's go to the game of the week, Morris. This was an obvious choice. Arlington 2-2, 2-0 in league play at Carmel, who's 3-0. Also 2-0 in league play, and this is a rematch of the section title from last year. Arlington lost at Scarsdale. Carmel won versus RCK. Overall, these teams have exchanged wins and losses a lot over the years, but most recently it's been Carmel, right? Carmel's 10-7 versus Arlington. They have won 4 straight, including 2 times last year, a win in the regular season and obviously the section title game. Let's start with Arlington. Arlington is kind of strong on both sides of the ball. I think last week, and again, a loss is a loss, right? But I did think they overlooked Scarsdale a little bit. And I think it caught up to them. But at times, Arlington was pretty dominant last week, especially on the offensive side of the ball, which I do think is their strongest unit right now. They're number 5 in points scored out of 14 teams. And listen, I think they were pushing Scarsdale around a bit, running the football. Every team they play, Mars, they're going to have a size advantage versus them, including Carmel. I think they're going to have a size advantage versus Carmel. And I think they're going to look to test the strength of Carmel. You're going to see 1 tight end with 2 backs looks, 2 tight end looks. You'll see some trips. They're going to shift tight ends over. They're going to try to move people around to out-leverage Carmel and get them off balance. And then you'll see some spread action. But I'm just going to say this. They rushed for 242 yards last week, Mars. Running the football is their number 1 identity. And I do think when they run downhill, it sets everything up. It sets up the play-action pass, which they do pretty well. Right? When they just go into their spread look and try to throw it around all over the place, it doesn't feel as comfortable. But when they run downhill and go off play action off of it, I do think that's when they're most deadly. And I think that's what they're going to try to do. Last week, Chaffee had 87 yards rushing. Lynch had 144 yards rushing last week, including 2 touchdowns. And obviously you have guys like Resigno, who he had 5 of 10, 73 yards and a touchdown pass last week. But he's another weapon running the football, especially off of that power read and some of the zone read stuff. And I think, relying on this offensive line like Cubberly and their tight end McGann, that's what they want to do. I think they're going to say, let's impose our size and strength and see if we can push Carmel around and wear them down defensively. Because it's, again, that's got to be their identity, play action pass out of that. And then getting the ball to guys like Davenport, who had a touchdown last week on 61 yards receiving. and guys like Jordan. But what's hurt them at times offensively, which has been a pretty strong unit, turnovers and negative plays. Those are what's been hurting Arlington at times, but I think the unit's been pretty solid overall. Defensively, listen, they gave up over 200 yards rushing last week. They were pretty strong against the pass last week, besides obviously the game-winning touchdown, but that was off a defender's hands, right? That went to a receiver. It wasn't so much a blown coverage or anything like that. But last week, again, over 200 yards rushing. I'm expecting to see them go up against some heavy sets in Carmel as well to try to run the football and see if they can run similar to what Scarsdale did. So that's going to be big for Arlington to be strong against the run, rely on their defensive line and their linebackers, guys like McGann, who is a very strong defensive player for them. Lavello is another guy who was very active last week, 9 tackles, also had an INT. If they can kind of get Carmel in uncomfortable situations, which is second and third and long, where they have to get out of their heavy sets and go into more spread stuff, I think it'll be in Arlington's favor. Mars, what are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I think Arlington's been a very impressive team this season. I think the key thing, and I do agree, I think their offense is probably their best side of the ball. But they're going to have a lot of pro formations. They're going to have a lot of spread formations. They're going to try to hit you with a lot of different stuff. And I do agree with you. I think running the ball is going to be their main priority because they've just been so efficient at doing so. And plus, on top of that, their offensive line usually outmatches a lot of other teams because of its size. And I think they're going to kind of see that too with Carmel. And they're going to test to see how can Carmel's front seven really match up this offensive line. So if they can develop the run, then at least it opens up a lot more ways to play. Defensively, I think they're also pretty solid too. I think the key thing is that their front seven needs to also have a big game because if you're forcing Carmel to go throw the ball and like second and long, third and long, I mean that's going to be in your favor more often because of the fact that the secondary for Arlington is pretty solid all around too.
Yeah. Let's go to the Carmel side. Offensively, Mars, this is the number 2 offense out of 14 teams so far this year. It's pretty crazy. Carmel lost the amount of players they did from the state champs and a lot of new faces with some returning guys able to turn around this quickly, right? So offensively, number 2 in points scored. And I'm expecting, again, to see a lot of heavy run sets. Carmel's been very strong with that, going into heavy run sets, running the ball downhill, attacking the edge of your defense. But can this offensive line keep up with the size and strength of Arlington's front seven? Big question mark, right? Carmel has kind of won these last few weeks by pushing people around, and they succeeded doing that against Rochelle, who had a big front. Can they do that against a bigger front in Arlington is going to be the question, right? But last week, Keating, he had 62 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. Worley has been a real strong runner for them over these last few weeks. Roseford, he had 2 rushing touchdowns last week as well. They can run the ball again, getting ahead of chains. That's when the Carmel play action gets done. And similar to Arlington, they're pretty strong off of play action pass. Right? I think get into the play action stuff, get into some of those jet sweep stuff. That's where Carmel really gets into a rhythm offensively. That's going to be the big test this week. Defensively, Mars, Carmel's the number 1 defense in points allowed out of the 14 teams in AA. So this defense has also been very strong for them. Last week they had 6 sacks. They forced 2 turnovers, had a defensive touchdown. But how will this defensive front seven hold up against Arlington's heavy sets? Hold up against Arlington's shifting? Arlington likes to shift, try to out-leverage your defense. And they're going to try to test the communication and test kind of the strength and toughness of this Carmel defense. So how are they going to react to that is going to be the big question to me. And listen, we know about guys like Bolin and Rosefort, 2 of the better players in this class. But there's going to be other guys that have to step up, like the linebackers and Smith and Risley, defensive linemen like Robles. And this secondary, you got to anticipate that this secondary is at times going to have to play man coverage, especially if Arlington comes out with these heavy sets. They're going to have to match them. Can this secondary hold up? Kind of being on an island at times. Is that going to work, right? We're going to see, can some of these secondary players make some big plays? There's a lot of interesting matchups in this one, Mars. What are your thoughts on Carmel?
Yeah, I think Carmel's offense has been very consistent. I do agree with you that, after losing a lot of guys, most of the time teams would probably fall off a little bit, but Carmel's been very consistent. They've been, like I said, the number 2 offense out of 14 teams right now in AA. And I think the fact is that they've been kind of going along with what you would call the Carmel way, which was kind of run in heavy sets, try to wear down your opponent, and then open up the play action. And then, if worst case scenario, you can always hit into the spread schemes because they do have that in the cabinet, right? I always joke around saying that Coach K sends the kitchen sink at teams because he's just got so many different formations and ways to hit you. So they're really going to rely on the run game first to really set the tone and also control the time of possession, because Carmel has the ability to just drain the clock, right, and just wear down defenses to the point where they won't be able to really counteract it, right? And I think it's going to depend on how this offensive line plays and how do they, how these playmakers get out in space, and then from there, I think they can kind of make some passes work. Defensively, number one in points allowed, which is great to see for Carmel, because the fact is, all around they've been very good, even with losing a lot of kids from that had graduated from last year.
Yeah, but it is a step up. This is a step up now.
No, I know, and that's going to be the key test, right? To see whether or not this defense is good or are they great, and I think that's going to be the question, because now you're playing against an offense that has an offensive line that's bigger than you. They also have a lot of playmakers on Arlington's offense, and the question is, will this defense step up and continue this performance that they have, but forcing turnovers, scoring touchdowns, getting sacks, right? These are going to be things that Carmel's defense really needs to continue to do, and it's going to have to start with stopping the run, because we all know Arlington's going to try to develop the run, so it's going to be interesting to see here.
But my keys to the game, Mars, and then we'll go to your matchup. My number one is the line of scrimmage, right? That's going to be where this game is won and lost. A lot of times it is won and lost, but to me, this is going to be the really important part, because both teams have playmakers, right? To me, who's going to win up front is going to be the big key in this one. And secondly, turnovers. Both teams have forced turnovers on the defensive side of the ball, and for the most part, offensively, they've been pretty smart with the football. Who wins the turnover battle, I think, wins this game. Mars, what is your matchup?
I think my matchup is going to be Carmel secondary against Arlington's receiving core, because I think the front seven for both for Carmel and for Arlington, like the front line for Arlington and the front seven for Carmel, are going to be evenly matched for regards of skill and ability. The question is going to be then, can Carmel's secondary be consistent and stop any sort of big pass play? Because we already know that Arlington will try something deep, because Rosendo can throw the ball, right? He has the ability to do so. And if this secondary for Carmel can be consistent, then it's going to be harder for Arlington to kind of hit the deep ball. But it's going to be a question to see which group will have the advantage here.
Yeah. My player to watch for this one, Mars, Owen Bolin. Offensive tackle and defensive lineman for Carmel. Both sides of the ball is going to have to be a beast. He's going to have to move people up front to help with that run game and be very disruptive on the defensive side of the ball. But before we go to game picks, Mars, I did do a little breakdown of Arlington's offense and kind of show that strength in the run attack and how it opens up the pass attack as well. For this video, we're going to talk about Arlington's rush attack and how it opens up their play-action passing game. And make no mistake, Arlington has multiple weapons who can run the ball. They have two backs that run hard, tough to bring down with one guy in Chiffe and Lynch. They also have Resigno, who is a big threat at the quarterback spot to run the ball as well. But there's a big onus on this offensive line and tight end group to move bodies and their fullbacks. And they have a good size advantage over most teams that they're going to play. And you can see in this first play, tight end, two receivers to the right. They have trips this way, nothing backside, and they have two backs here. And this is going to be just pure power football right here. So this play, running power to the right. The most important thing is getting movement at the play side, right? And that's going to be onus on this big tackle right here in tight end. They want to move this defensive lineman off the ball to the backer. And you're going to see another double team right here on this nose guard who tries to slant this way. You're going to get a backside guard pulling. You're going to get a kick out block by this fullback. And your running back is going to follow this block and find a seam. And you can see really good movement right here. They've blown the defensive lineman about 3 yards off the ball. Now getting up to the linebacker. Nice kick out block right here. You can see a seam is developing. You even get a Scarsdale linebacker. Reads this pretty well. Tries to undercut this block. But this running back does a good job. It's hard to tackle this guy one-on-one. He's going to beat him to the hole right here following this guard. And look at him. Real big seam opens up. Makes the guy miss in the open field. And he's off to the races. Right, and you can just see, look at this opening up right here. Just power football. Let's go to another play. And again, now they have receiver backside, but pro. They have tight end, flanker. There's another power football you're going to see play right here. Fullback coming in this direction. Similar play, right? Movement at the point of attack. This combo block right here up to the backer. You're going to see the guard pulling around and this kick out block by the fullback. Same play. Look at the movement. Generate that movement. Look at the head inside right here. Kicking out this edge defender. It creates the seam right here. Guard running through this hole. Running back following him. Once they get to the second level, these backs are hard to tackle. Look at them just bounce off guys for a touchdown. Now Arlington could just hammer you and hammer you and hammer you, running the ball. But that sets up their play action. Now similar, when you look at the first play when they were in pistol, their pistol again, tight end pro, similar to the second play with two backs. This time they're going to give a heavy run look, right? So you're going to see, looks like power again. Going to have these two guys down blocking right here, guard pulling around. You're going to get a kick out block, running back running to this hole. And because of them, they can run the ball consistently. It freezes up everybody. You have to respect the run, especially in the secondary. So watch this heavy run look. Again, solid fake right here. You can get that heavy run look here. Now linemen have to be careful. They can't go too far down the field on the pass. But look at the eyes. Right? You know the front seven is looking to stop the run. Look at the eyes of the secondary. Staring into the backfield. And now on the back, this wide receiver is going to kind of run a slant, skinny post right here. And all he has to do is got to get inside leverage on this corner. Quarterback's got the eyes of the safety. He's frozen. Great ball placement. Good job by the wide receiver to get leverage. And it's off to the races. The combination of running the football as the priority to open up the pass has been huge for Arlington this year. And I imagine that's going to be the formula going into their game versus Carmel. All right, Mars, let's go into our game picks. Last week was a real rough one. I went 3-3 last week. I don't think I ever went 500 before. You went 4-3, and friends at Lowhead went 3-4. And when we look at the season record, I'm 15-3. You are 17-4, and Lowhead is 15-6. So you're ahead of the pack, Mars. So congratulations. But let's get into our game picks. First game up, White Plains 0-3 at Ossining 2-2. League game here. White Plains 0-2 in league play. Ossining 1-1. Listen, White Plains' offense has been kind of hit and miss. They're number 10, and you expect that from a lot of new faces coming in and a young quarterback. My question about health is a big one. Isaiah Thermoque had a rushing touchdown. He got injured. Sam Mendez had a rushing touchdown. But defensively, Mars, 13th out of the 14 teams in points allowed. They gave up over 250 yards rushing last week. And Ossining's offense can run the ball. I mean, LaFaro had 3 rushing touchdowns last week. Benny Stella had 2 rushing touchdowns. I'm going to go with Ossining. I know this might be a bit of a surprise, but I'm going to go Ossining at home, running the football, keeping White Plains' offense on the sideline for a bit. They make enough plays defensively. I'm going to go Ossining.
I mean, this is definitely going to be a tough one for sure, because I think that White Plains has the ability, because generally what happens is as time goes on, when you're a young team, you do make a comeback, you do get better as the time goes on. And I do agree with you. I think the fact that injuries is going to be a question. I'm also going to go with Ossining. I feel like they just have more health, and the fact that they can run the ball means that they can control the line of scrimmage and time of possession. I'm going Ossining.
Next game, we broke this one down. RCK 0-3 at John J. East Fishkill 2-1. Non-league game, but a big rivalry. Listen, RCK going through a lot of struggles, a lot of young players, going to be a lot of bumps and bruises. John J. East Fishkill is playing well on both sides of the ball right now, offensively very explosive. Again, I rushed over 240 yards last week. RCK struggled against the run. I'm going John J. East Fishkill.
Yeah, I'm also going to go John J. East Fishkill. I think that they are kind of the next team to beat, in my opinion. I feel like they have been consistent. They've been playing very well, offensively and defensively. I'm going to go John J. East Fishkill.
Interesting you say that, because the next game, Mamaroneck 3-0 at Yonkers Brave, who's 0-4. Mamaroneck, Mars, they're the number 1 offense in AA right now out of 14 teams, but defensively, to me, is the big surprise. They're number 2. They're tied for number 2 in points allowed. If they can play defense along with this powered offense, they're going to be real tough to beat. But Damari Hamilton, injured last week, not sure his status. He's a huge part of this offense. But boy, Jack Ramsey came in and absolutely dominated on both sides of the ball. 195 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns with 21 tackles, Mars, and 2 sacks. Listen, they got a lot of different guys who can make plays. We know about Cox, had 3 rushing touchdowns last week. Yonkers Brave right now, the 14th ranked defense in points allowed. I'm going with Mamaroneck.
I'm also going to go with Mamaroneck. I think that they've been very good. If it was not going to be John G's Fish, goes to Mamaroneck. That's the next team to beat right now. And I think they've just been consistent. I think they have a lot of playmakers. I'm going to go with Mamaroneck here.
Mamaroneck beat John Jay's Fishkill a couple weeks ago, so just keep that in mind. North Rockland 2-2 at Yonkers Force, who's 2-2. I think this is a huge league game when it comes to the standings. Listen, we broke this game down before. Yonkers Force has been a real good story so far. Both sides of the ball have been pretty consistent offensively, hit a lot of big plays. But North Rockland, they made plays in each phase of the game last week, and if they can find some consistency running the ball, which I do think this week it will happen, they don't have as many penalties. They make enough plays defensively. I'm going North Rockland on this one, on the road.
I'm going to go with Yonkers Force. I think the Yonkers Force has been very good. I think they've kind of been playing tough against every opponent they played, and even in games they lost, they were, keeping it close. And I think the Yonkers Force has the ability to score, right? I would say pretty easily, but they're efficient in scoring. So I think that Yonkers Force is going to have the advantage at home. I'm going Yonkers Force.
Suffern 1-2, 0-2 in league play at Mount Vernon, who's 2-1. Can Mount Vernon have a 2-game win streak at home is going to be a big question. Mount Vernon's got a lot of playmakers. They make a lot of big plays in space, have a lot of speed. But I'm going to go Suffern. I think this is a huge league game. Every league game is important, but Suffern needs to get on the track and get on a winning track right now. I think they go heavy run attack with Dorselli, with Joseph. I'm going to go with Suffern on this one.
I'm going to go Mount Vernon. I think Mount Vernon kind of was fiery hot last week in their brand new, nice looking stadium, Memorial Field looking really nice. I think that's going to give them a fire again. They're playing at home. They're going to get the whole packed crowd to show up, and I think they're going to be rocking and rolling. Their playmakers are going to make some big plays. I'm going Mount Vernon.
Scarsdale 3-0, 2-0 in league play at Rochelle, who's 2-2, 1-1 in league play. This is a real interesting big rivalry league game here. Scarsdale has kind of come hot on the scene. A lot of teams are starting to give them the respect that they deserve, and I think Scarsdale is for real. New Rochelle was embarrassed last week, but it was on the road, this time in New Rochelle, where they have won 8 straight against Scarsdale. This is a tough one. Scarsdale is very explosive, has a lot of playmakers at the quarterback spot. Kobe Baldwin, one of the best players in the class. I think this is a pride game. I'm going New Rochelle, Mars. I think this is my upset of the week. New Rochelle is going to beat Scarsdale at home. Playmakers will make enough big plays in the passing game, and they're going to run the ball and give Raiden Davis the ball. I think it's going to be giving Raiden Davis the ball. He's going to have some success. They're going to do enough defensively to slow down Scarsdale. Close game, going to Rochelle.
Yeah, this is a very interesting game, and, I'm going to try to use some history here. Frank, you said that New Rochelle won how many of the last meetings between them and Scarsdale?
So I believe they're 10-1 in the last 11, and they have won 8 straight.
Yes, 10-1 in the last 11 meetings. Scarsdale going away to New Rochelle is going to be one of the toughest things that they had to do. Playing in New Rochelle for any game, any season is always difficult to do.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be 10-2 because I think Scarsdale is going to make the upset. They're going to be. They have the better record, but I think they're going to go into New Rochelle and they're going to win because I think they are the next team that's a fiery hot right now. I'm going Scarsdale.
Game of the week time. Arlington 2-2 at Carmel, who's 3-0. I am not going to pick this game, but I'm going to say this. Arlington has had Carmel circled from the preseason, right? We've heard it in kind of the off-season story that they did on Arlington and Low HUD. They mentioned Carmel by name in that article. That is the focus. That is the target. And I do think they overlooked Scarsdale a little bit last week, looking forward to this game. And you're going to see a very motivated Arlington team. To me, this feels like a mini Super Bowl or a mini championship, right? They want to go in Carmel and win to prove that, hey, we are a contender, legitimate contender. I think they have an opportunity here. And when you look at Carmel, listen, They're the favorites for a reason because defensively, number one in points allowed so far this season. Over the last few games, they communicate pretty well. This defense can swarm the ball, and offensively, they have been running the ball very well with multiple backs that can hit you. Offensive line, two giants going at it, Mars. Who wins and why?
Yeah, I see. The biggest thing I'm looking at in this game is this is a battle of the Titans type of matchup. I think, like you said, in the offseason amongst all coaching circles, you've heard that Arlington's had this game circled, right? They've been planning for this for nearly a year, it sounds like. And this is finally the moment where we get to see Arlington versus Carmel and which team will be, the have the momentum going forward. Obviously, Arlington has a lot of weapons and they have a big offensive line to kind of push bodies around. And I do agree with you. I think they overlooked Scarsdale, thinking that we'll just run over this team and then we got Carmel next week. And they got shocked. I think, in my opinion, it was away and they got shocked. And I think they're going to be really angry. I think they're going to play angry this game because they know this is a big moment for them. And for Carmel, this is kind of a really important matchup too, because there were a lot of people out there that were saying that Carmel was going to fall off, right? And they said, hey, they won the state title. They're going to lose a lot of players. But right now, Carmel's been playing very consistent, especially on the offense and defensive end, being one of the top and being the top defense in AA and being one of the top offenses in AA. And the question is going to be, were these stats inflated because they weren't playing as good of teams? But now here's the big test. You're playing against Arlington, the next team to beat. And the question is going to be who wins? I'm going to go with Carmel. I think Carmel is at home. I think they're going to be riled up. They're going to be fired up. It's going to be a battle. I think it's going to be an old school type of run battle. And I think whoever has the advantage in the trenches between the Arlington offensive line and the Carmel front seven is going to have the advantage. I think Carmel's going to have that advantage because they're just going to send the heat and they're going to be at home and they're going to be just excited for another home game. I'm going to go Carmel here.
All right, everyone, that was our show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We appreciate you guys. As always, make sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe for future content. Have a great time watching the football games this weekend. We'll see you all very soon.